Hi everyone, welcome to Munich's Chinese Film Club. I'm the programmer YAO Ruoyao. In today's session, it's our great honor to invite inner landscape director Mr. Frank Scheffer and producer Mr. ZHAO Jia to join us. So let's begin with our interview. Hi Frank and Jia, thanks for joining our today's session.
Hi Jan.
Hi everyone.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's our great pleasure. So in this month, Inner Landscape will be the films which shows towards to our German audiences. So thanks for sharing. So actually, I do have a couple of questions regarding the film itself. So let's begin with Frank.
Okay.
So Frank, as we know, Inner Landscape itself is the film about the music cooperation between Holland and the Dutch. So through the whole journey, may I ask how did you come up with this idea?
For the inner landscape?
Yes.
It's quite interesting in a way that I feel like the inner landscape, I finally reached a point in which I could choose my own subject matter in the sense that I asked GUO Wenjing to write the composition.
Oh.
So it's quite unusual. So I created.
So you created with Mr. GUO Wenjing together?
The film created this opera, so to speak. Because of course I asked him that he could compose whatever he wanted. I didn't tell him to compose this specific piece, but I wanted him to compose an autonomous piece of music for the film, so that I could film it. And so GUO Wenjing chose Sichuan opera.
So he chose to.
So he chose the subject, but the film chose him to choose.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So since he chose Sichuan opera, was he also choosing Miss Chen Tianmei to join the project directly?
Yes, I remember when I met him for the first time, and I proposed this to him. He immediately, had the idea and immediately wanted to call Chen Tianmei. She was busy, so he couldn't get her on the phone. But actually, it was right away on the moment itself.
That's good to know. And how about the cooperation between the Dutch conductor, Mr. Espana?
Espana. Yeah, they are old friends.
Oh, okay.
You know,
With GUO Wenjing.
with GUO Wenjing. As a matter of fact, the Chinese composers were more or less discovered for the Western audiences back, I think, in '92 or '93, when the Holland Festival invited 5 of them. As a matter of fact, the new ensemble invited them. And they had a huge program in the Holland Festival, and it was like with them done, and GUO Wenjing, and Qi Song.
Thank you.
And this was like an explosion, you know. It was one of the most exciting things, new discoveries I remember ever happened at the Holland Festival.
So that's where the journey begins.
And that's where the journey began.
Okay.
So I always wanted to work with them from that moment onwards.
So that's how actually because I know you also made another documentary called Tea before.
Yeah.
That's with Mr. Tang Dun.
Yeah.
So was it that the first documentary that you cooperate with the Chinese composer?
Yes. I mean, there is another composer who doesn't live in China, which I got to know at a certain moment when I started the project about the composer Edgar Ferrez. And Edgar Ferrez is one of the, I would say, most visionary composers of the 20th century. And he was even so visionary in my eyes that in 1949, so right after the Second World War, he decided to choose a Chinese to become his assistant, which I think is incredibly visionary in the sense of widening up his perspective, you know. So and this was Chu and Chong.
Zhou and Zhong.
Zhu and Chong. And I thought that Chu Wenchong was one of the most interesting thinkers about modern music in the West, because he was looking at the juxtaposition of the Chinese tradition and the Western music. And so at a certain moment, if I remember well, the opera and the Dutch ballet, they did a project with Tandun called Tea Opera, and they invited me to talk to them about the project, and I immediately got very excited. So I met Tandun, I remember, in the Ukura Hotel. We had Japanese food. This was a Japanese co-production with the Century Hall in Tokyo. And beside I made a documentary, I was also the video designer of the opera. And I loved Tandun, you know, he's my age, and I really like him a lot. But after I finished editing the film, I kind of felt like that he put the Chinese idiom, the Chinese elements, more in an effect in a Western kind of opera. And I discussed this with him, that I felt like why not making the Chinese idiom more central, since you were a Chinese composer. So why is that not more in the center? And there also grew my feeling that I wasn't finished with Chinese composers, in the sense that I wanted also a composer who didn't leave China, because all of the other ones who were in the Holland Festival in the beginning of the 90s, they all went abroad, except for GUO Wenjing.
Oh, that's right.
And I thought it was very interesting. And another main reason why I was interested in the subject matter was that I thought that when you look in history, that whenever a country became economically powerful, it brought forward a culture which was very influential, influential. Yeah, right. So, for example, you know, Venice and Florence brought forth Renaissance. The Dutch paintings in the 17th century, the modernism that came out of the Industrial Revolution in Central Europe, or let's say after the Second World War, abstract expressionism in the United States of America. So I felt now, when China becomes such an economic power, I mean, what art are they bringing forth? And my love, of course, is music, so I was looking for avant-garde composers to look what they had in them, which I was very interested in.
So what's the difference between these two cooperation between Mr. Tandun and between Mr. Tandun and also between Mr. Guo? Because as you mentioned, Mr. Guo, he lives in China longer than the other composers. So during this cooperation, did you feel anything different?
No, yeah, I think GUO Wenjing stayed more to the original culture where he's coming out from. And I think Tandun was more influenced by a Western idiom, you know. But GUO Wenjing too. I mean, in China, when you study music in China, you have only two things you can choose. That's modern Western music and traditional Chinese music. These are the two where you have to choose from. And I felt that GUO Wenjing, also by choosing Sichuan opera, which is very daring in my eyes, stayed a little bit closer to his own origin than Zudem. I mean, they're both wonderful composers, but that was the thing that interested me. You know, to try to go deeper into the Chinese culture as a Westerner.
I think GUO Wenjing, in this case, just to add a little bit, in the film also, he chose to put Sichuan opera in the center, to compose things around it, so that he hoped that in this way this ancient opera could survive. He said, I don't know whether it will survive or not, but this is how what I can do. So I guess that is the film, of course, registered this process of his trying to do this, right? So in that sense, I guess, indeed, yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And also during the whole films, we thought the whole crew also went to China to make the filming. Was it your first time bring the whole crews to China to have the filming over there?
No, the very first time I brought the crew to China was back in, I think, 1997. When I made a film with a famous Dutch composer, Louis Andriessen. And he did a piece, a trilogy on death, the subject death. And the second part he called Tao.
Tao.
Yeah, Tao.
Taoism.
Tao.
Yeah. And so he chose one of the 52 parts of the, or whatever, how many are there, of the Tao Te Ching, and based his composition on that. So we went with him and his wife and the crew, we went to China and filmed him there.
So that's around 20 years, right? In between the first times and then now there's this project. So any differences you feel?
You mean in China?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Was there a
striking back in '97 was that we had a hotel near the Tiananmen Square.
Oh, in Beijing.
And I mean, there was a very, very broad street, and most of the street was occupied by bicycles.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
So
like in Holland.
There were enormous amount of bicycles, I remember.
Not anymore.
Not that vanished.
Yeah, that part of history was kind of gone. But do you still remember some most funny moments while you were in China this time, or was the most unforgettable moment for you through the Inner Landscape, this project?
Of the Inner Landscape project?
Yes, indeed.
The most unforgettable moment?
In China.
In China? Yes.
Oh my God, there were many unforgettable moments. I guess for me, the most impressive moment when I was standing on Mount Ermei, which we climbed, and it's also a very important shot in the film.
Was the poster from the great?
Yeah, where you would see the clouds as a sea, as waves coming up and going down. I never had seen that before in my life, and so I was very impressed by that. When I was doing the shot that is in the film, I was doing that with single frames, so clicking. So you have this time lapse, so that in the film you see the clouds moving quick. But I forgot that I was on 3,000 meters height, and I didn't have a cap, sun cap, or I didn't have even cream. So, and I think I was standing there for a couple of hours, doing the click, 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 click.
Okay.
So when I came back in the hotel room, I looked like you know, like my head was red as an orange.
The sunburn.
Totally burnt.
Oh.
I mean, my complete skin renewed after that experience.
Wow.
So it was unforgettable. No, but see, with China, there's always, for me, that I kind of feel very close, without speaking the language. But I always feel very close and very welcomed, and I always feel being at home. You know? Yeah. So.
That's the warmth. And through the whole production, did you face any challenges?
Yeah, I mean maybe.
Well, now it's your turn to say that. I got this. I will have the same question.
Yeah, just
The biggest-
maybe from your perspective.
For me, there was one very important challenge, which never got resolved in a satisfactory way. That is the fact that GUO Wenjing doesn't speak English, and that was for me the first time that I made a film where my subject matter, where I wasn't able to talk with my subject matter directly. I mean, I made all these films about, you know, the composers in the West, you know,
like John Cage.
like John Cage and Pierre Boulez and Stockhausen, but I could always talk to them. I could communicate with them directly. And with GUO Wenjing, there was always translation in between, which I felt was very frustrating for me. So it not enabled me directly to touch his soul, to immediately react or make a little joke, or he's making a joke which I understand, which breaks the ice immediately. So this translation, I felt indeed sometimes lost.
Lost in translation.
Lost in it, yeah.
Okay.
Which is a pity.
That I can understand. So now that us also hear some thoughts from the production perspective from producer. So Jia, as we know, the Inner Landscape, since it's the co-production project. So for you, how did you begin with this project?
I think it began actually in the time when I started to think that I would like to do something with film. That was in 2011, I believe, like 10 years back. Because when I see what is being brought up in the West to portray China, I always have a little bit of feeling of unsatisfactory. Feeling that China is portrayed in a way that does not represent the diversity, I would say. So gradually this idea started to come into me, and that also brought me further. Like I introduced myself to different production companies here in the Netherlands, just to say, well, to sell myself, so to speak. Like if you want to do some cultural stuff like film, ask me. So I guess so that's what I did. But what eventually happened is, of course, all by accident. I approached this producer, which was a producer of this film back then, Peter van Huisteen, without too much expectation. But I said, I'm this and that, but he phoned me back in really unexpectedly, because I was told that he would be extremely busy, so Jia, don't expect too much. But in fact, he phoned me back in an hour, saying like, we've got the project, maybe you.
Wow.
I was like, well, something is happening. And then I got the script without the name of the director. And back then I didn't know Mr. Scheffer. Then I read the script. I was like, oh, this is about my hometown.
Yeah.
I need to get myself involved in this. So then I called the producer, obviously, and then I was actually saying, why don't you meet the director first? And so we met, and that was a funny encounter. And I kind of, because back then I didn't have much experience with film production. I think this is one of the first real production that I'm hired to go on set with heavyweight crew.
Okay.
Also with camera, which I need to clear as the custom, and to get everybody safe and everything done, and so
like
that was like I mean, yeah, and for real, you know. But of course, somehow I had to convince the director that that I can mean something for him, and so like, and I guess that's how it all started, no?
Yeah, that's the story from your side.
Okay.
But from my side, I mean, I remember that I had a deadline to deliver the script, and I worked through the night, and I finished it, and I had a call at 9 o'clock in the morning with my producer and
The same producer.
Okay.
the commissioning editor, and they loved it, and so I was very happy. So at that time I was living on one of the canals in Amsterdam, so I stepped outside to smoke a cigarette, and then somebody passed by on a bike, and Janine, and Janine said, "Hi Frank, how are you doing?" I said, "I just finished the script of my Chinese project, and I'm quite happy." And then she said, "Oh, but you should meet Jia ZHAO." You know, I mean, this was maybe even before she spoke to Peter van Heijsteen.
Oh, really?
This was before Christmas.
That was really like really accidentally, but then in parallel or something.
Simultaneously, like synchronized.
Yeah, that's a lot.
You know, like the universe works, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we met. We didn't see each other for I think 3 weeks later.
Yeah. After Christmas we met. At Frank's cafe.
Okay.
And that was the first time. So I brought my little catalog of paintings, and I thought, I couldn't show that I have a great track record of producing film. I can at least show him that I'm from that region. You know, I can paint. Maybe you can hire me. We did get very drunk on that day.
But I was very impressed by her art.
He didn't tell me.
I was really impressed. I mean, I think I thought, wow, this is, you know.
So that
I want her to be in the project immediately. You know?
So that's how it started. But it was absolutely very unforgettable, I can say, as a project, because I really need to bring the director together with the cameraman, who also actually they use Super 16. So it's quite a lot of equipment, and that was like a lot of sweat, and also, you know, a lot of things I think you could probably think of all happened. Like the euro also goes down when I got a bunch of money, and when I arrived in China it was already devaluated. I was like, oh, now I have to call a producer. First thing I need to say is like, it's already over budget. So all that, I guess I learned all at on set. I mean, for my first production, that was quite intense.
That was quite heavy. I mean, you got right away.
The bar very high already.
But I remember that I wanted something of the old tradition, you know, in the original setting in the rural area. And without Jia, I never could have found the people who are in the film. It's
amazing.
I really was blessed to be able to work with Jia on that, because one, she was the ideal intermediate between me and my subject matter, because you did a lot of the talking and the negotiation and the primal contact making and all of that.
So you were like the coordinator between two parts.
Yeah.
I am actually everything, to speak, at the beginning, because I think we kept the crew very small. But for me, I can also say that was really for me the real trigger to decide that I would really like to do more with China. Because as Frank said, I had to bridge the communication. It's not only really translator, I feel more involved as a communicator. So to get the conversation going. And I guess by talking to people, I sometimes feel that maybe I always feel like China's changed and my hometown's gone. and so changed that I don't recognize. But I feel when you go really deep, something is still there. And I feel that is very beautiful to discover, and in a way also very encouraging to discover something which is valuable, which is still there. And you know, despite all this commercializing stuff and things which are maybe less, I would say, less favorable, so to speak, from a spiritual point of view. So I find that was a very intense but very unforgettable experience for me to make up my mind to become a producer, and that's where I am also. I stayed with that feeling. Yeah.
And would you guys cooperate again in the future for different projects?
Yeah, we did, and we are doing. I mean, it's of course a challenge, because normally in a film you have only one captain, you know, one head. But we try to collaborate. So we collaborated on a film on a Chinese painter, He Duling. That was presented at the ITFA like 4 years ago, 5 years ago.
4 years ago.
And then now we are collaborating on a new project. The Japanese composer Ruichi Sakamoto is making an opera called Time Opera for the Holland Festival. And so we got involved. We want to make a documentary about it. And I think it's very important that we collaborate together, because I mean, my mind comes out of the West and Jia's mind comes out of the East. And the two together give you more complete feeling than either of us would have done alone in this case of Time Opera, because it's about the global village and the whole universe kind of idea, you know, with time and dream. So
I think it's more like, indeed, we would more like to collaborate content-wise instead of like being producer and director, kind of. And because that's also how I experienced in the landscape, because I started actually being a researcher, being everything, being somebody also assistant to the director, like, and then of course I grow into the role of the producer of the film together with another like three more producers on that project. But I feel the part that I enjoy more with working with Frank is really, I think also a challenging part is also to talk about the content. I enjoyed that the most. And I believe back then when I was, because Frank is an established director, so I am of course nobody producer. So when we are on set together, and he invited me to come into the frame, to look through the frame, and actually to say, is this the right frame? I think that was for me an absolutely a very unforgettable moment in my career, and that I feel, okay, this is how a creative process could go, despite, I mean, regardless how the profile of the person is. So I find that was for me a very important moment of my film career, I would say. Yeah, I feel encouraged to say something that I feel.
Yeah, there's a composer that had a huge influence on me. His name is John Cage.
Yeah.
And he has this wonderful saying about the ideas outside of the mind open the mind better than the ideas inside of the mind. So I like to open myself up, and especially with Jia, you know, I feel like we're living in a global village, and so we became one, and so the collaboration is to me more significant in this time than it was ever before. I think we should get to know each other much better. That's why I feel like I made In a Landscape 4. Is that if we don't do it together, then we will be lost, you know, with what we do to the earth. I think there's something very special that we can learn from Chinese culture in the sense of the relation of the human being towards nature. I mean, human being is a part of the nature, and I think that's more embedded in Chinese culture than in the Western culture, which tries to, especially since the Enlightenment of the 18th century, which tries to get the human outside of the nature. And I think that's, of course, like we all know now, a huge mistake. So.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing with us today. It's our great pleasure, and it's really nice story to hear about the behind the scenes. And so we wish you a lot of good luck for the next project, and we hope in the future we can show you again to the German audience.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.